I'm Catherine Ross, and I'm here live from the floor of the NYSE with Jim Cramer. Jim, what's on the top of your mind this morning?
I want to take the other side of the trade of what's going on today. I think people are saying, okay, well, that's the peak. And Goldman said this. The backup in interest rates is over. We're going to come back down. And that's impacting everything. And I said on Squawk on the Street that I feel it's the other way, that you don't want to buy the Proctors and the Coca-Colas here, that you want to buy tech. Because tech's had a big run. But I think that the tech story is a great secular growth story. I think the industrials, when we look at how they did during earnings period, they were good. And that the soft goods were no special. The tough one for me is retail, because we have retail sales on Friday. But I like as I wrote this morning, I like the industrial side. I like the Skyworks solutions, which are down badly today. I totally get that. But I do, and the banks are also hard, because if rates go back down, they're going to keep selling J.P. Morgan. We're going to regret that we didn't sell more Citi. So I do want to take the other side. I think that the economy's good. Rates should go up a little more. I was on that D.R. Horton call. If October this year was so much better than October last year, rates should be higher. So there I am, and I know that the president is berating Powell, and Powell did say, look, if things go wrong, we're ready. And I think there's a lot of people who feel that now maybe the tariff side wins, the Navarro side, and that would slow the economy. It hasn't really had any impact on the economy. But I don't want to buy the Proctors. I want to buy the NVIDIAs if they sell off, and I want to buy the Skyworkses, because I think things are robust, despite China. I don't know. Right now I'm wrong. I admit, right now I'm wrong.
Speaking of the president,
I don't
though.
want to be wrong too long.
You don't want to be wrong too long?
No.
Fair. So speaking of the president, we get the first day of impeachment hearings today. In the past, the impeachment hearings have not impacted the market. Okay, yawn away. But is this going to be any different? I got to ask this.
Just a second. You don't want to talk to me. Barry Goldwater, Scott. People don't know who they are. Barry Goldwater and Scott broke with President Nixon and sided with the Democrats. And that was the end of President Nixon. When Scott, who was known as the conscience of the Senate, went from the Republican side to the Democratic side against President Nixon, it was over, okay? And when Goldwater went, you knew that he was going to resign. You show me a couple of prominent Republican senators that go over to the Democratic side, and Trump's finished. But I don't see anyone doing it. And I know it's so long ago, and people don't remember. Scott, I campaigned for Scott, great Pennsylvania senator, Republican. And he was so smart, brilliant man, and he very much principled man, and decided that Nixon was not a principled person, and he had to go. And then it was a floodgate. If there's someone who is one of these guys who breaks with McConnell and is a Republican who moves over, then Trump will be finished. If there's a gate, a floodgate like a Scott. But there really isn't a conscience of the Republicans. Like Stu Symington was a conscience of the Senate. He stood up to Senator McCarthy, Republican. I mentioned Scott. If no one breaks ranks, then it doesn't matter.
And the market won't blink?
No. And I see this is once these hearings are over in the House, once these testimonies are over in the House, if you hear Republicans breaking ranks, then you'll know that Trump's done. But I have to tell you, I don't see anyone even remotely thinking about switching. So it remains a sideshow until a Republican breaks ranks, and then it's meaningful. So all you have to do is watch the Senate, because the Senate, it will be a groundswell if a couple of people go. But I look at the head count and don't see McConnell losing it. And so therefore it's kind of like what happened with Clinton, not like what happened with Nixon. And I think one of the reasons why, well, of course, there's Republicans hate the Democrats now. It used to be more convivial and congenial. But also, it's hard to understand. It's just hard to understand. And I know that the president has been very adept at saying, well, look, if you think I'm bad, Biden's son, He's a master at that. Reading Deep State by my friend Jim Stewart. It's like, well, you see, the president's so good at deflecting, and he makes his base say, I'm sure his base is saying right now, Biden should be locked up. Because we heard that they don't understand, it's not a sophisticated, it's a very sophisticated case against the president with Ukraine. And plus Ukraine, there are people who remember that the Crimea was Russian, okay? So that historians actually could understand, even though Putin's a terrible man and a worst probably opponent in the world for us, that the Russians had a case against Ukraine. So it is such a convoluted story that it does seem like the chief is off the reservation. And right before Nancy Pelosi agreed to start the hearing, she told me that she wasn't going to impeach him and that vote for impeach, and that what was going to happen was let the ballot box do it. So I think there's a lot of people who say, well, why don't we're so close to the election, just let the ballot box do it. So I don't see anything major happening here unless, again, you find one used guy. People should Google him if you don't know. That's what's good about Google, and you'll see exactly what I mean.
There's your homework for the day. Now, speaking of Google, yesterday we were talking about Project Nightingale, and you said that when a story like Project Nightingale breaks, the reporter is generally looking for the government to take action. And, well, we're getting that, reportedly.
Yeah, well, this is why the masters of the universe, the Stanford computer geniuses, they don't get it. See, they look, it's like, wow, how atavistic a newspaper, right? Well, but that's, the justice system relies on reporters just to find an injustice. And reporters do it. It gets written about. And then there's an agency, someone wants to make hay. Now, I was with some people last night, bankers, and they said, Jim, you really don't get it. Google didn't have any of the names. And so there's nothing wrong. And I was speaking, and I said, okay, understand, that's an abstraction, whether they did it right or wrong. If you ask me whether it's good and they were able to do it, I would say yes, but that's not the way it works in our country. They did things that we regard as being unauthorized by some, so therefore a U.S. attorney or someone's going to look into it. And that's, per se bad, because they play for free. And again, I heard, yeah, but Jim, you don't understand. The names weren't compromised. I just gave up. Young people.
But we have so many investigations into Google right now, and there's so many headlights on Google from a government perspective. Is this a sign of high beams being turned on?
Well, I think it's a sign you're not going to get multiple expansion. That's what I care about. The multiple expansion is occurring in the financials, and it's occurring in the industrials, not in these stocks by any means. And that's because they keep, with the exception of Apple, but even there with the credit card, they don't understand what the ordinary person thinks. They're too cloistered. I'm going to use a term that's not these guys, but if you go read Bad Blood, it's a fabulous book about...
Fantastic book.
Yeah, about Elizabeth Holmes Theranos, you see that there's this Stanford group, and they're not paying attention to anybody or anything. And that's really one of the main parts of the book that I love, which is this insular Stanford culture. And that is so in play here. So they just don't have any common folk feel. They're just too cloistered, and that's why they don't get it. The checking account by Google, no. Now, Dan Schulman is not one of those.
CEO of PayPal?
Yeah, and Dan Schulman was up from American Express, understands the other side of the trade, knows what's truth. Remember, this is Benioff. You got to read Trailblazer.
CEO of Salesforce?
Yes, Benioff, which with Salesforce we own the stock, and it's been great. It was bad for a while. Benioff makes this point. He said, 2020 is the year of truth. Truth. That there's people who understand truth and they're going to be win, and there's people who dissemble in a kind of ethereal way and they're going to lose. A checking account from Google, I'm not going to say it's a lie, but it's not truth. It doesn't stand for truth. It just doesn't. And look, I happen to like the people from Google very much, and if you ask me again about the Ascension healthcare system, they're trying to do what Cleveland, the Cleveland Clinic has this great database of what causes heart attack and when people, and I love it, and it's done by the Cleveland Clinic. And but when I went to Apple and said, look, you got to go buy Cerner and link that with the Cleveland Clinic, like, Jim, we don't want data available. Like, I wanted all the data on the watch, right? But, they're concerned that maybe someone gets your watch. They're hypersensitive. The country is hypersensitive to what Google does and Facebook does. So why aren't they a little more thoughtful? And, well, they'll use a time-honored phrase that I keep hearing from anyone who went to Stanford. You don't know what you're talking about. My mom, my late mom of 34 years ago, who passed away the other day, the anniversary, so it's on my mind, said that Jimmy, if they say, Jimmy, you went to Harvard and you were like at the top, the Summa and the generals, and then you went to Harvard Law and you did really well. So if they say you don't know what you're talking about, maybe you just say, well, maybe you don't know what you're talking about because you're that pedigree. I used to say, Mom, it doesn't matter. It's all a joke. Harvard was, blah, blah. And she said, no, at least take pride that the one thing they can't say to you is you don't know what you're talking about. Just throw it right back at them. So, Grandma Louise, you're right.
All right, Jim, now you've got
Grandma Louise.
Oh, Grandma Louise.
Grandma
Okay, you've
Louise.
got your Action Alerts Plus members only live call at 11:30 a.m. this morning. But before
geez, it's
I
10,
know,
12.
I know, and before we get there, I just want to ask
Canada
you.
Goose. Good quarter, but stock's going down.
And before we head back to the office, I want to ask you about Cisco, which reports after the bell today.
Yeah, I'm
What's
worried.
the one thing that you want to watch?
I'm worried. I think that Cisco, this isn't a quarter where when you look at what Jay Sri said on Arista Networks, that there was a pause in some spending, and that should impact Cisco, same way. But Cisco's already down a lot. I mean, because if Cisco went to 43, 45, I'd load the boat up. But, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about.
All right, Jim.
Isn't it funny? These videos are different from the other stuff we do, and I tire of all, except for Benioff, by the way. Benioff never says that. Benioff
Really?
has never said to me, no, he's just like, wow, that's a great perspective. And you're right. Benioff, who's, by the way, the smartest of the guys, but he didn't go to Stanford. Maybe that's the key.
That he didn't go to
Southern
Stanford?
Cal. The Southern Cal guy. Southern Cal.
I mean, that's still California.
I love Southern Cal. I do. I love everybody's ever
Why
went
do you
to
like
USC,
Southern
I
Cal so
love.
much?
Why do I like SoCal?
Yeah.
I went and did my show there. And first of all, I remember from the 70s when it was a dangerous, bad neighborhood. And then I went back there when I did my show, in the second year of my show, and I said, this is the promised land. It's beautiful. I used to think UCLA was better. Well, UCLA
Much
was a great
warmer than
school.
here.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The campus has changed. They've got unbelievable history department, unbelievable literature department. That it's like Carson. He went west. And I just thought USC, I mean, I told my kids, you got to look at USC. You got to look at USC because it's just, it's magical. It's magical, and here it is. It's 25 degrees today? But it ain't 25 degrees. So it's Southern Cal.
So any of our
anyway,
viewers
I just
watching
love
should
the
consider
schools. I love the
applying.
school so much. It's funny because boy, the West is so different. I got into Stanford. I said no to Stanford because Stanford was a backup school back then, and I didn't apply to SC. And the SC football team was great back then when I went over. But I urge people, if your kids are thinking about going to college, you got to go look at SC. I mean, if you like history, if you like literature, if you like film, like acting, if you think theater's great, these are all places I would have said go to Yale, maybe Michigan, but it's USC.
All right, Jim, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course.
Guys, we are now heading over. We're going to head back to the studio, and then Jim's got his 11:30 a.m. Action Alerts Plus members only call over on actionalertsplus.com. You got to tune in. He's going to be talking Cisco. He's got 2 new initiations that you're going to be talking about.
Two,
That's so
and boy, they're
exciting.
hot.
Oh,
and one
I'm
of them
really
is down
excited.
so much, it's really interesting.
Ooh, all right. I'm Catherine Ross, and we'll see you tomorrow.